Good evening and welcome. We have auto captions on for your convenience. If you would not like to have auto captions on, you can turn them off by clicking the CC logo on your screen and disabling captions. Rabbi Neuberger is a Maggid Shir in Israel for many decades, who has given guidance to individuals of all walks of life in so many varied situations. He is a beloved Rebbe to fathers and sons, and the address for people of all ages who seek Hadracha. My name is Yael Zellinger, Day School Liaison at the Center for Jewish Education. CJE supports Jewish education and educators of Baltimore. When it became evident how hard you, the Rebbeim, Moros, and teachers of our children are working and stretching to make this year successful, even rearranging what success means to accommodate the new reality, I was miyayit with Rabbi Hopfer about how to bring positive energy and hakaras hatov to the hundreds of Baltimore educators. And Rabbi Hopfer suggested I ask Rabbi Shraga Neuberger to speak to us. Rabbi Neuberger, who always has his finger on the pulse of Baltimore's Jewish community and is deeply aware of the struggles and successes Rebbeim and teachers faced this year, agreed without hesitation. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Rabbi Neuberger, for sharing your time and expertise.
I consider it a schus on my part if I can give even a morsel of chizuk to all the loyal mechanchim and mechanchais that are partaking in this program tonight. In general, I believe that mechanchim and mechanchos aren't given by our society enough credit for their work in regular years. I've long felt that if I could, I would institute that in every shul in America, the front row of every shul should be seated with the mechanchim to show our kehilos the importance of their work. That won't exactly work well with the mechanchos. I don't think I can put them in the front row of the men's section. But even if there's a front row in the women's section, that too, and to find ways for the general population to appreciate the work of mechanchim and mechanchos is vital to giving the mechanchim the added strength and chizuk to do the wonderful but challenging work of chinuch. That being said is true on any year and any day for any teacher that walks into the classroom. But during this last period of COVID, in my mind, the front line of the world that is keeping things going, even more than the exalted praise that we owe to all the nurses and doctors who have over this time period done Herculean tasks of helping sick people, and we owe them a deep debt of gratitude. They are there to help people's gufim, their bodies, which is essential. The neshamas of people, the neshamas of our children are dependent on the mechanchim and the mechanchos. And in this difficult time, with plexiglass, with distance learning, with masks, with mandated separations, with all of the various things that have happened to protect the health of our community, has made this year a challenge beyond description, as was stated. And I believe that every mechanech and mechaneches, when they daven every day and they say the bracha of Hanosein la ya'ef koyach, that Hashem gives those that are tired strength, all the mechanchim and mechanchas should have special kavana, and we should have kavana for them as well because of the enormous task that this has brought. Torah has to be taught face to face, connecting, masks, distance, learning, all these things are absolute hindrance to the connection that a Rebbe and a Mora has with a Talmud and Talmidah. And we believe that, especially in teaching Torah and other subjects, it's information. But Torah, it's a way of life. And communicating our values of Torah. Even the secular teachers can communicate values of Torah in the secular realm as well. And the more the teacher, the Rebbe, is connected to the Talmud and Talmidah, the deeper the impression is, and the greater effect it has on developing these young hearts and minds to make them part of the growing Jewish community. And it is so troublesome to me to think about the long-term effects. Hopefully, with the help of the Ribbono Shel Olam, this terrible decree is hopefully waning, that the Eibishter sent the possibility of vaccines, and that hopefully this horrendous pandemic will pass. B'karav Emirtz Hashem. Hopefully, it won't cause long-term hurt to our Talmidim and Talmidas. But the reality is that it's been a very hard year, and I believe that each and every school should take it upon themselves to meet and to think about what the long-term effects may be and try to come up with different means to help take care of that problem, which is not, I don't believe, the purview of my few words tonight. What I would like to center on is to give some strength to all the teachers that in the remaining weeks and months of the year, that we can, whatever our situation is, however distance it is, but to end the year in the best possible way, in order that the children should feel the positivity of connecting with their Rabbeim and Moros and teachers, in order that they should feel the beauty of what Torah is. And I want to share with you a story that I think is relevant to each and every person. Every day you walk into the classroom in general, and in particular at this time when chinuch is such a challenge. I don't like telling stories over of miracles because we can't perform miracles. And while in this story there's an element of something special that we can't replicate, the lesson of the story is relevant to us. And the story goes as follows. This is a story that was handed down from the family of the Vilna Gaon to Reb Chaim Volozhner throughout all of his generations. It was said over by the Brisker Rov, and the story goes as follows. The wife of the Vilna Gaon and a friend of hers were teammates in collecting tzedakah for needy families. They used to go together to people that had more money, a little bit more money than they had, and raise it to help these needy families. And one day, as they were doing their chesed and they were getting older, the Gaon's wife and this lady made a deal. And they said, we're doing all this kind of work, but we really want to know what in Shemayim, what in heaven do they appreciate about our work? So they shook hands and said that whichever one of them predeceases the other one, they're asking them as a favor to come to the other one in a dream and tell them what's important in heaven. And as it happens, the wife of the Gaon's friend passed away beforehand. And the deal they made was, I guess these people were on such a level they could do such a thing. We don't have a right to do such a thing. But the deal was that they'll come within 30 days. And the Gaon's wife had a dream and her friend came to her. And her friend said, really, there is in Shemayim, you're not supposed to say over what the values are then. That's for us to figure out in this world. And then we reap the benefits of the world to come. But since we made it kiyaskaf, we did a handshake, and we promised one another that the first one would report. So I can tell you one small incident that I'm allowed to tell you. And the incident had to do with their raising money for poor people. One day they went to a lady's house, they knocked on the door, and she wasn't home. And they left the house and were walking away. As they were walking, the Gaon's wife looked up and saw in a distance that the lady whose house they were planning to, they tried to visit was in fact on the other street turning the corner. And she pointed with her hand and says to her friend, says, look, there she is. And the friend looked up and they both went back, waited for the lady to get to the house, changed niceties with her. She gave the tzedakah, and they went on their business. And she said, remember that story? Then she continued and she said, in Shemayim, both of us are going to be rewarded for the fact that we knocked on that door and we got the tzedakah. But they're going to give you, she was telling the Gaon's wife, extra credit for your lifting your hand and pointing and saying, there she is. Because every action that's positive is noticed in Shemayim. That was the end of the dream. When you're in the classroom and you have the pressures of controlling a class, giving them the information, making it exciting, keeping the kids engaged, all the difficulties that there are in a normal, regular year. And you get reward for all of that. And Chazal tell us that when you do a mitzvah that's more difficult, you get 100 times more schar than when it's easier. In the pandemic, when you're with a mask or you're on Zoom and you're frustrated because it is so difficult, and you give it your extra push and an extra smile and an extra good word, and perhaps the child won't even appreciate it at the time, maybe later they will, and perhaps the child will. The Shemayim is there, sees what's happening, and gives reward for each and every extra push that we have in doing the mitzvah of being mechanech our children better. And so, if you can go into the classroom and believe with all of your strength that as hard as this is, if I can try to be upbeat, if I can try to be positive, if I can try to be complimentary, if I can try to be excited, that each and every extra push is appreciated and recorded in Shemayim. Now, we're all normal. We're all human. We may have had moments teaching through Zoom, etc., with all the difficulties where we may not have had the same patience. And just like the children are normal for having difficulties with it, varying degrees depending on the nature of each kid. So we, as teachers, as Rabbeim, as Machanchos, can also not do a perfect job all the time. We're human, and the Shemayim knows that as well, and heaven, they know that as well. But given the importance of our work, if we can push ourselves and say, you're not alone in this classroom. The Shekhinah is with you. The Ribbono Shel Olam is looking and is recording when you do something extra. You don't really feel up to it, but you push yourself a little bit within being normal to try to communicate with our Talmidim and Talmidos, try to make them feel the beauty and the deliciousness that the Torah offers. Every extra ounce of strength you may not see in the paycheck here. In fact, you won't see it in the paycheck here. But in the big payday, in Shemayim after 120, all of those things are recorded, appreciated, and rewarded. If we can keep that thought with us during this time of pandemic, especially, and in general, it can help us day in, day out, wake up in the morning with all the challenges of teaching and the pandemic adds, and wake up feeling that it's worth it. Chazal tell us, and the Mesilas Yesharim expands on this idea. Kol hoylech acher hachitum v'hatoilada. Everything depends on the end and the results. Whatever went on the rest of the year, if the end of the year and the result is that we can create with all of these barriers positivity, that's what counts ultimately. To have a chitum, an end, and results that are positive. Now, there's no one-size-fits-all answer to what a person can do. And a lot has to do with each and every personality of what your strengths are. As the Mesilas Yesharim himself says, when a person is trying to serve Hashem, you have to vary your experiences by sometimes using the same method, sometimes doing something different. Ein hadvarim miyusadim elo alev mevin b'seichel nacham. Having success in Avodas Hashem is not based on anything but an understanding heart, a clear thinking, ki yefsher levayer hapratim she'en lehem kates, because it's impossible to come up with details because there's no limit Every day is a different challenge. The time of the year, the time of the day, the weather outside, how much is on particular kid's mind, the amount of um, emotional stress that children have been put through because of this pandemic is something that may have results for decades. We can't know yet. We have to daven. But if we realize that every extra effort is recognized in Shemayim and will grant us Sata Shmaya, that can be helpful. That can make a difference. The wisest of men, Shlomo Melech, says, La'adam archelev me'Hashem ma'ana loshen. A person can plan things, and we've only going to explain, let's say a person is going to talk to a king or to a president or to an important person, and he tries and prepares his speech and his plea and goes over it again and again of exactly what he's going to say. And then when he speaks, the words did not necessarily come out exactly the way he wanted. And that the Gon says is Mehashem Ma'ana Loshen. At the end, a person with all the preparation that he does, he needs to have the help of God, and the help of the Rebbeinu Shalom. They should say the right things. And that's how it is in preparing lessons and shiurim as well. You can prepare and you can do a lot of work, and you can even decide what words you're going to use. But when it comes out, you can't just read from a paper for hours on end. The words that come out sometimes are more effective, sometimes not as effective. And all of us as teachers know this. Know sometimes you can have a great preparation and feel it went over great. And sometimes even after great preparation, you say, it didn't come out as good as I wanted. So we need Sata Shmaya for that. Say a pasuk of Tehillim before you go into the classroom and say, Hashem, help me make this good. Hashem, we're in such a hard time. Kids are suffering. Parents are suffering. Teachers are at their wits' end. It is so difficult. Rebbeinu Shalom, help us say the right thing. Rebbeinu Shalom, help us have the inner strength to persevere and realize that this is enormous test and really opportunity that we as Mechanchim can rise to the occasion. If we could even be together right now in the same room and have the energy of 100 people together, shaking their heads, being together, seeing each other, that has a power in itself. And even now we're limited by having just to be together on a Zoom. But we should take this togetherness that we have now, which is limited, and say we all put in this extra half an hour now to get some chizuk. Rebbeinu Shalom will see that. We're going to say our Tehillim. We're going to prepare our lessons. We're going to realize that in Shemayim there's great, great appreciation for what we're doing, far greater than you can imagine. It's mamish. There are no words to describe, to talk to such an exalted group of people. You are the people that should be making the 6 and 7 figure salaries. We live in a world that doesn't appreciate what Mechanchim do. Shemayim, appreciation is endless. The reward is endless. If you wake up every morning saying, Hashem, thank you for the opportunity to teach Yiddish Kinder. Hashem, thank you for the opportunity to even do this at a time of COVID. And we trust that in that schus, Hashem will give us the knowledge, the wisdom, the heart to enjoy our work in this difficult time. And I wish each and every one of you continued hatzlacha in your work and feel proud, exalted by the work you're doing, and Avada, the Rebbeinu Shalom, will give us the strength to be successful in Eretz Hashem, to be mechanech the next generation of Jewish children in these trying times. Everyone should be gebenched. Have a wonderful summer and have an excellent end of the year. Thank you again for the privilege of talking to such a chashuv crowd.